It's also a spectacle, and I think the filmmakers, I think Donner knew if they could actually get people to believe that he is flying and it doesn't look hokey, and you don't hear that wind sound like from the show, and it really is something just model it. People are not going to care about the plot as much, but that's going to be a compliment to the film, I think, because it is going to be more of a spectacle. It is going to be more of this thing that's just going to blow the roof off of theaters.
Up in the sky, look! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's Superman!
And welcome back to the SuperCaZt. Steve Z here, along with SuperFosh, talking about none other than Superman.
The movie.
Yeah, Superman the movie, which I think they've actually dropped that recently. Like when I look up the film, I don't see Superman the movie as much anymore. I don't know what happened there. Even though on my 4K right here, it does say Superman the movie, so I don't know what that's about.
I'm going to call it that because, I mean, James Gunn's calling his new movie Superman. So, to me, this is the definitive Superman movie right here. So, as we'll talk about.
It is, and it's more than that. To me, it's the preeminent comic book film. Because I not only was it the best comic book film made at the time, I mean, what did you have to really reference it to at the time? There might have been some random like made-for-TV stuff with Spider-Man or the Incredible Hulk or something, but nothing like this. Nothing like big budget. Let's throw a lot of money at this and make something on the scale of like Star Wars or something.
No, not at all. I mean,
it's a crazy film to think about it and sort of like when it was made.
When you look at today, we are so flooded with films from DC and from Marvel, obviously. You mentioned Star Wars. They have a flood of films now. But when this film came out, this came out in 78. I think Star Wars came out in 77, if memory serves. But to me, that's when all of this started. So, and you watch this film, it is over 40-something years old now, almost 50 years old. And it still holds up. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, well, if you've seen our show, we've talked about this film. You're right, we have. We're not ignoring that. But what we're celebrating several things, just because this film is great. But number two, Dave, my fellow compadre here, just got this glorious film on 4K. And that's one of the biggest reasons we want to talk about this film is how it holds up and how it's translated on 4K. So I want to start there because you got this film, a couple weeks ago, a month ago?
I got it a year ago.
You got it a year ago, and you haven't watched it until the other day.
No, I haven't watched it. The only one I've watched of this set is Superman 3, because we did an episode on that last summer. We've talked about this film before. We've talked about Superman 3. This is not going to be Superman 3. We're going to talk about this a little bit differently, even though I think we did talk about an hour about that film, but most of the time we were talking about the random stuff from scene to scene and Richard Pryor jumping all over the place. But no, this is Superman.
We're probably giving that movie a more positive review than most people. So, take that for whatever you want.
Definitely. I definitely dug that film. And I've just had this sitting on my shelf, not really getting around it because I've been watching so much other stuff. But sometimes around this time of year, like the beginning of summer, I get in the mood for this film. Because like I said, I think this is the best comic book film ever made. And I used to not believe that. Like growing up, I'd watch this film. I remember watching it on Disney Channel. I remember watching it on TV. I probably rented it. Yeah, I definitely checked it out. But to me, it clicked for me much later down the road. I think it was like beginning of college, right before Superman Returns comes out. And that's when I was like, I really respect this film. But then when I watched it like 10 years later, that's when it really clicked for me. And that's why I come back to it so much, because I just think the craftsmanship is insane. Like I said earlier, I cannot believe this film where it stands in its sort of the time it was made. And it still, like you're saying, stands the test of time. I will take this story, I will take this acting, I will take this comic book representation up against anything. And I know there's stuff that's a lot of people would say is probably better, but to me, seeing this on 4K, it's great. So I actually had already bought the disc before, but then I got this with the set, which this one has Dolby Vision. So I'm not going to get into the specs from it too much, but I just say, hey, if you're a Superman fan, you owe it to yourself to do this. It's definitely great on a big screen. Makes the colors pop like you've never seen. You will believe a man can fly in your living room.
And you do, yeah.
So that's my sort of glowing review of the disc, and I guess that's why we got it out, but also because I want to watch the film again.
Yeah, I mean, I've not watched it on 4K, but I've watched it on Blu-ray, and I mean, this podcast is called SuperCaZt for a reason. I am, and Steve can vouch for me, probably one of the biggest Superman fans there is. I'm sure there's bigger. I don't know. I don't have like a whole exact room, but I do have posters. I have figures. I have all this stuff. But where the love for Superman came from for me was this film. I mean, it hooked me. That's not Christopher Reeve on screen to me. That is Superman. That is Clark Kent. That is who Joel Shuster and Jerry Siegel invented. He just happened to come alive in the 70s and just, blow everybody away. And everybody who has made comic book movies has to give this movie, since then, has to give this movie praise. I've heard Michael Keaton give it, before he started Batman. He was like, he thought it was silly because the only other great superhero film up until Batman 89 was this film. And he gives it praise. Everybody does. And there's a lot of pressure to follow this film. I think, especially if it's a Superman film, but I think if it's a superhero film in general, because it's going to get compared to this film, and we'll explain why if you haven't, seen the film. And this is not going to be a shot-for-shot, scene-for-scene review. This is simply a love letter to this film. Like I said, Steve watched the 4K. If for some reason people are like on the fence about the 4K, what's the biggest thing you think that it does for this film? Because there's a lot praise about it, I'm sure.
It just makes you notice more things. Definitely, for me, it's a lot of the lighting choices, a lot of the costume choices. It just makes all that stuff just stand out more. Really get to see the sets they've designed. I mean, you can see all the neat things that Lex Luthor has in his lair. It just makes you feel like you're part of what's going on, and that's the way I think film should be. I know some people are not a huge fan of it because they think maybe there was some color correctness going on there, but I'm like, did you watch the movie back in '79? And also, what print did you have? I mean, that was all depending on what theater you were in. This is the best way you can view this film now, in my opinion. The sound is great. I just played you the opening menu song, and that'll get you hyped. So the sound is great. Totally. The vision's great. Everybody should get it. I'm done with the 4K. Let's get to this film.
In the decade of the 1930s, even the great city of Metropolis was not spared the ravages of the worldwide depression.
For me, this opening, like the very, very opening, like I used to not get it. Because it opens up with this thing, and it's like, oh, from the news of the Daily Planet, and it says like 1938. And
this kid reading the comic book.
It doesn't mean anything with the rest of the film, really. But this time it actually kind of clicked for me for kind of what Richard Donner, how he views this character and what it means to him and what he thinks it means to, like, I guess, America. 1938, what's going on? Well, it's the Great Depression, and the American public is seeking escapism. So how cool is it to be a kid in the Depression? You're hearing about the terrible stuff happening overseas, World War II going on, or just us brewing together. And you pick up this comic book, and this guy can fly. This guy's impervious to bullets. And he's also, on top of that, he is the best guy you've ever met. Like, just hanging around him makes you feel good, you know?
Yeah.
That's Superman, man. And I think that's what this opening's about, is saying, here, this is our love letter to this. We're trying to capture this tone of this comic book that has meant so much to so many people. Yeah. And we're going to do our best job with it. And here we go. Here's our film. There's the thing. We get the screen after that, the titles.
And the music kicks in.
Yeah, and it's just masterful because I think it's like I was saying, this is a love letter to comics and to Superman the character. And Richard Donner, like, I know there's better directors out there, but I think the work that he does on this film, as far as like bringing what was on the screenplay, helping the actors find the characters, and just sort of the tone that they create, it's huge. And there's definitely a collaborative effort. We'll talk about John Williams and all him later. But it's kind of cool. I love it how this film opens. What do you think about that weird comic book stuff and going into the credits?
I love it. You know, to go from the black and white in the 1938, and you know, and the older this film gets, and the more we get away from, you know, because 1938 was not that far away from 1976 or 77, 78 when this film came out. So I think it's easy to go, wow, you know, that was a long time ago, but that's, I guess, for us now, like the 90s or the 80s, which is really weird to think about. So you've got this film that tries to bridge that gap, and I think, like you said, there's a really, really good way of doing that with the black and white, with the kid and the panels, and then all of a sudden you hear the drums coming in, you get the space shot, and then boom, here come the titles, and you're ready to go. It's just great. It's just fantastic. It really fits the character. I think it fits the tone of the film. This is not a downer film. This is, as we said, a love letter to the character, I think, in a lot of ways. Yeah, Chris Reeve is the perfect actor, and we'll get into the actors and the roles in a minute. But this movie does not work, not because of Marlon Brando, but because of Gene Hackman, any of those other guys. This movie does not work without Chris Reeve. You know, it just does not. And so to see him in the costume later on, it's just a magical thing. But the start of this film is pure, absolute 100%. You haven't seen a thing on screen yet, and you're fired up and ready to go just because of the music and the visual.
Yeah, and I know some people might want to fast forward through that or something.
Oh yeah,
just because
silly if they do.
It is kind of repetitive, and I'm sure when this came out in 1978, it blew people's minds. They're like, "What? This is crazy! Am I actually in outer space?" But to me, the reason why I always kind of like watch through it, not only because I like the song, it's sort of like the old orchestra thing, you know, the overture. And I love it when the old films used to include that a lot, just to kind of set the mood. And I like that this film does do that, because it opens up like a play after that. We are in what feels like ancient Greece, but it's the future.
But
this is Krypton, or unless you're Marlon Brando, then it's Krypton. But he's got his own thing going on in this scene. I love the Krypton stuff just because they make it so epic. Like I said, it feels like it's classical Greece or something in the future, but it's, I don't know. What do you think about the Krypton stuff? Let's get into it.
Okay, so I'll admit to you, as a kid, I've always loved this film from a kid. But I remember being a kid, and I think it makes sense, being very bored with the Krypton stuff. Just being like, okay, yeah, I know he's a baby, and I know Marlon Brando is a good actor and Godfather. I've only heard of the film. I hadn't seen it yet, but I don't care. You know, I just didn't care. But as an adult, as someone that just loves really good acting and just really good dialogue, and I don't care that he calls it Krypton. How cool is Marlon Brando as Jor-El, man? I mean, I think Russell Crowe's great in Man of Steel. We'll talk about that later on if you haven't already. But come on, man. Does it get any better than getting The Godfather? By the way, I mean, we hadn't even talked about it. This movie's written by the man who wrote the Godfather novel. So we're kind of coming full circle here with the Godfather himself as the father of a god, so to speak. So yeah, I love this Krypton stuff. The mom, she doesn't do a whole lot. She's just kind of there. She kind of holds the baby, I think. But this is really Marlon Brando's show, and I don't care that he doesn't know his lines and he's probably reading them off a thing. That doesn't bother me. I don't care. I don't see it. It doesn't bother me at all. I really think this is a powerful start to the film. It's very Shakespearean. It's very, regal kind of thing. It's just great. I love the heck out of it.
Yeah, and it's really cool because not only is this great setting, it's neat because we get to know who Jor-El is, and what is he? He's like a politician, a scientist, a lawyer of sorts. He's all sorts of things.
He's a Superman.
And yeah, I guess so, but just in a different way. And that's what kind of stood out to me is his society is, I don't know, it's very cruel. It's very by the books, very... I mean, I think the other films kind of go into that a little bit more, especially the Man of Steel, but I definitely get that in this one. And I think Brando, like you're saying, he is definitely reading off cards. You can tell that he doesn't do these lines, and that goes back to his style. Remember, he's like a Stanislavski method guy.
Right.
So he's like, I'm just going to be Jor-El.
Yep.
And then these words are going to come.
Yeah.
And I kind of appreciate that.
Well,
you could say he was being lazy, that he didn't want to memorize his lines, or that he didn't actually want to read through the script.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think he definitely portrays the character. I get sort of what he's about, just in his few words and in his actions that he does.
Yeah.
I kind of can see how did this man become who he is and why he does what he does, which I'm going to have to come back to later. This is the part that really clicked for me with his character. But I want to talk about these three guys first, because we will definitely forget about them. And that's Zod and Zora and what's the other guy's name? Nog or something like that?
It's Zod, Ursa, and Non.
Nod, okay. Yeah.
And it's so funny because as you were talking about that, I was thinking about that. And they make a good job in Man of Steel of saying that Zod and Jor-El have this kind of rivalry, that they know each other and they don't really do that in Superman the movie, but it doesn't bother me. What about you, man?
Well, I think he curses him, and that's definitely effective. Like,
this is true. That's true.
That's something I thought about. That man, that'd been crazy if this movie would have come out the way that Richard Donner actually had planned, and at the end of this film was those three guys emerging from the Phantom Zone.
Yeah,
and then you're like, oh man, this next one's gonna be really good.
Exactly.
That would have been so cool if that would actually happen. But it is what it is. But these, to me, that's the part of the story that you just kind of forget. And I guess it lays the seeds for stuff that happens later. But I guess it also goes into the thing that, Jor-El, he planned for a lot, but he didn't plan for that. And that's what's going to come back in the second one, is he didn't plan for those three to show up where he sent Kal-El. Yeah, you're going to forget about it after this scene, but it definitely is going to come back, and it kind of does some groundwork for the sequel, which I think is hard to kind of do organically like this.
I think Sarah Douglas, I think Terrence Stamp and Jack that plays Non is very good, and I wish there was more of them in this film, just because, I don't know, I wish they would have showed up a little bit more, especially when Soup's, but I get it. I understand. They're trying to build the thing, and Lex Luthor is obviously the chief bad guy. But I love Terrence Stamp's acting. I think he's a very good Zod. He's very believable. And I guess my biggest thing with them, like I said, is I wish there's just been more of them in the story when we get to Metropolis and Superman and all that stuff.
Yeah, I guess they're just saving it for the sequel. And I think there is like more stuff I remember watching on TV, or I might be confused about the beginning of the second one, where it shows them like trying to steal something, and they get caught. I don't know. I think they just kind of create sort of the setting. We see this trial happen. We see sort of what kind of place Krypton is, and from there, we get introduced to Jor-El. He goes back and he realizes, crap, these people are not listening to me. I got to get my kid out of here. And this is the part that really stood out to me this time is
okay.
Jarrell is the master planner. That he knew, I mean, because to me, I guess I overlooked this growing up, or just the past several times I've watched it. He picked out Earth. It wasn't just some random planet it landed on. It's like, no, this is the place. He's going to be like this. This is what's going to happen when he gets there. And this is what he's going to do. He basically plans it all out. And it's sort of like, even though he's sort of an absent father for most of the film and for obviously most of Clark's life, he still kind of set him up for success. He set him up for really good things. And it's just kind of awesome how he's able to carry on the legacy of Krypton and what Krypton could have been or what it should have been, and carry on Jor-El's name, carry on all that. And it's at the same time, he's going to inspire these people. And I don't think that the film gets into heavy-handed the way that the other renditions of this character is done. I think it just kind of encapsulates it all with just a few Brando lines, and you get all of that I was just saying. It's really a cool part of the script and really good scene. I love it when he's just planning out, this is where you're going to go, and then he sends him off on the crystal ship.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of heart with the character. I think that a lot of people forget that, especially when you get to Earth and the teenage or young adult Clark figures out who he is and goes and sets off for Antarctica or wherever it is he ends up going to throw that crystal and make his own little version of the Fortress of Solitude and that sort of thing. And then he gets reconnected with Jor-El. And I think that all works. I think, I don't think it's cheesy. I don't think, and again, I don't think whether he's reading lines or not, I don't see Marlon Brando phoning in this performance whatsoever, especially when he's talking to young Clark and he's like, yeah, you're going to be something special, and I'm glad you're okay, and I'm glad that, that I helped you with that. So I think that all works up until we get to the Metropolis stuff. I really think that a lot of people may want to fast forward it because it kind of seems like it drags or it doesn't matter. But I think it completely does from a plot standpoint.
Yeah. I love this first. I looked at it, I paused it right after he gets to Metropolis. It's 50 minutes, this whole first part. And that's a big chunk of the film, like nearly half of it. But I love it because, like I said, we get this whole thing with Jor-El carrying on the legacy. And then we see the Smallville stuff, and we see sort of how, this is kind of messed with Clark a little bit growing up with these powers that he can't use. And we just get this one part where he just kind of showboats a little bit, waves to people on a train, and then we get this lashing from Jonathan Kent. And I like this, once again, simplistic storytelling, but we get a lot about the place that Clark grew up. I mean, Smallville is just Norman Rockwell painting, 50s. It's just very much like Americana. And then we hear what Jonathan Kent has to say to him is like, he just sounds like a good dad, He sounds like, I really love you. I really care for you. And hey, man, there's a reason you got these powers, and you're going to be awesome. And just kind of gives him what he needs. And this scene, this whole segment, it's, like you're saying, you could just fast forward through it. You're not really missing a lot from the plot, but you're missing so much character if you do that.
Yeah, and I just love John Ford as Pa Kent. He's not in the movie very long, and I think it's tough watch, and I'm sure it is for you, especially as a parent now, but even as just a son, to watch Clark's reaction to his adoptive father having a heart attack, and the way Clark says after the funeral, I've got all these powers, but I couldn't save my own father. I couldn't save my own, adopted dad who took care of me when I was vulnerable. And God, that tugs at your heartstrings. And with all the comedy and all the everything that happens in this film, I think there's a lot of really good drama that's not cheesy, that's not off-putting or out of place. And I think the best part of that is this whole thing with Jonathan Kent, and then you get the funeral, and then it's like, okay, yeah, I've got to go. I got to go and do my thing. And Ma Kent, which gotta say for her performance, I think as a kid, this was another part of the film I didn't appreciate as much, but the performance of the lady that plays Ma Kent.
Yeah, I guess, it's a part that's just there, but I definitely, now that you mention it, I can see what it feels like to lose a husband. I can see that wear on her face, and now she's realizing, I'm about to lose my son too a little bit. Yeah, but I like this part where he goes off, finds the Fortress of Solitude, and that's the part you were saying earlier. And this is once again, this kind of went over my head a little bit in past viewings. So yeah, he had his Earth dad that kind of raised him for those first few years, but he gave him the heart. He gave him kind of what you should care for. But at the same time, we did not know. I don't think he knew how to use his powers or anything like that. He didn't have that direction. And then once he finds Jor-El, and Jor-El gives him all the knowledge and all these things that are going to make him even more super, I think that's when he gets his direction. I think it's a neat part where he finds out who he really is, why he has these powers, and what he should do. And like we were saying, they don't do it very cheesy. They just kind of set it up, and he's off to Metropolis. And that scene, that culmination of all of that, after you've heard this great John Williams score, uncovering the Fortress of Solitude and everything, and we have this thing with Jor-El, the music just keeps building and building and building, and then boom, John Williams flexes there. He hits those notes of that Superman theme right when Superman is seen in costume in the Fortress of Solitude, and he just flies toward the camera, and it's probably one of the best scenes of the whole film. It's just great.
Gives me chills just to think about it, man. Yeah, and then we get to Metropolis, and a lot of people says, well, this is when the movie really starts. Well, no, as we've hopefully shown, this movie's been going pretty good. But yeah, okay, fine. He becomes Superman, he becomes Clark. But I think one of the geniuses of this film that everybody, even if you don't like this film that much, you cannot say enough of how Chris Reeve is Clark Kent, a certain character, and then he puts on the Superman costume and he's a completely different person. And I think that that's brilliant. I think that shows, you think, oh, he's just got glasses on. No, if somebody is that committed and he's got his hair a little bit different and he's that committed to being a klutz, because he doesn't have to do any of that. He could just be, and I think they get away from that a little bit with the Man of Steel character and what Henry does, because he's not quite like that. But Chris is, and he makes it work, better than anybody, I think.
Definitely, because once again, what we're talking about, they understand the character. They understand what makes Clark Kent, what makes Superman. And a lesser actor could not pull this off. I think the fact that he's pulls this Clark character off, he's just so funny. He's just all jelly, oh gee golly shucks guy, and he faints in that one scene once danger appears. It's just all these little things that are so funny when you think about him and make him seem so weak and such a pansy, and it makes it to where whenever Lois thinks about it later, she's like, no way, that can't be Superman. She's just like there for half a second, she's like, no, that can't happen. Yeah, that's brilliant storytelling. That's obviously built into the character, but made the comic book work, because otherwise, why is everybody in this whole world stupid? But he pulls it off as the actor, and he pulls both roles off. As Clark, he's the bumbling klutz that
Yep.
apparently nobody just thinks, man, it's crazy how fast this guy can type. He's just, very nerdy, very silly. But then when he becomes Superman, he changes his posture. His voice is different. He's got a different sort of rhythm to it. Everything about his voice has changed, and every way he says the line has changed. And I think he can crack a joke, but he's pretty serious though. He means what he means, and he does not beat around the bush. And that's kind of what I like about this character is he's always direct. He's very honest. He can't tell a lie, as he says. And I think that performance comes across with Chris. He exudes that warmth that I think the character has to have, otherwise the character does not work.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I feel like this film does not work unless Chris Reeve works as Clark and Superman. But you have the other half of Clark Kent, which is, of course, Lois Lane. And this film is not overly done. In fact, I don't think it is at all with the whole romance of Lois and Clark. I think you kind of have the companionship and you have the, intrigue. I think she's more definitely into Superman, which in turn, I guess she's into Clark, but she just doesn't know yet. But talk about Margot Kidder as Lois Lane, because there again, I remember being young and not being overly impressed with her performance as a younger person. But I think now as an adult, I think she's very funny. I think she's pretty. I think she does a good job of, being that, tough guy to his bumbling Clark. And I think she makes it work too. What are your thoughts on Miss Kidder as Miss Lane?
Oh, she's great. I mean, she's, like you're saying, she has that strength that this character needs, that independence. Yeah. But at the same time, there's one man out there that can make her shake in her high heels, and that's Superman. She just gets kind of weak in the knees around him, falls over for him. And I think she pulls both of those off, that she's very confident, she's very funny, she's got the jokes. Apparently she can't spell too well. But all these little things that she does, that part of the aspect, sort of like her, I guess her reporter self. It definitely seems like she's putting up a front at times. And then I think she's very vulnerable around Superman. She just becomes like a teenage girl that kind of can't get over it. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's like sort of attraction, but also just he makes you feel comfortable. I think that's a big part of it. And she's able to be herself a little bit more around him. I do think that one scene, though, is kind of weird. I mean, after they have the questions and everything, which I like that scene a lot. That's great. The whole
interview scene,
them flirting, basically, and I love that part. But then once they get up in the sky, I'm buying it for a long bit, because I think back in '78 that would have blown people's minds. It's like they're up there flying, it's crazy, and they're going over the Statue of Liberty and all that. It looks cool. But then it gets into this one part where it's like inside her head, and what do you think about that part? She's like, am I dreaming? Is he?
No.
That's the part's weird.
I think it's hilarious, and I think it is because I think what Donner's doing is it's getting you inside of what Lois would be thinking about, because she can't say this stuff out loud, otherwise she's going to look dumb. And we've already kind of established she's got this very confidence about her that even though it's shrinking by the second with Superman. I love my wife quote this scene all the time.
Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me. Who's got you?
But with the scene with the flying, and you hear, I mean, that's her thinking out loud, not even out loud, but just thinking, I have been pretty with everything my whole career. She's probably seen some crap. She's probably been in war-torn stuff, and, nothing is really surprising her anymore. But by golly, she's flying with a dude. I think it's a sweet scene. I think it's kind of a romantic thing. So yeah, I totally buy the hearing the thoughts.
Yeah, and it's the way I thought about it this time is like whenever you're reading a comic book, I think they captured that little thing, those different sort of shaped bubbles. That's kind of like what's going on inside their head. I think that's kind of what they were going for there.
Exactly.
And that kind of works. And that whole scene is awesome just because the music it's insane yet again.
Yeah. If you listen to the sound of her voice too, while she's doing the thinking, she's got a very strong, very confident voice. This is almost like a childlike voice. And I don't know if she did it herself or it's an effect that they did, but it's a very soft, like, what am I doing here? I can't believe this. You know, she's very soft. It's just very there's an innocence. I think that's the best word to describe it. Is there's an innocence to this surefire reporter that seems to know everything. She has no idea what's going on. She has no idea how she is flying, and I just think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think it's really cool, and like I said, it's a very well made scene. Can't get over it. But once again, everything we've talked about really has nothing to do with plot, says nothing to do with conflict. And that's what I like about this film is, yes, we are going to get some danger. We're going to get a villain here in a little bit. But to me, most of this film is, it's about Superman. We're just watching Superman happen, you know? And I think the filmmakers do a good job of just taking their time. None of it feels like it's filler. All of it adds to this character, and I think that's awesome because a lot of times with these comic book films is you get so plot driven, so about action oriented and things like that the character kind of is an afterthought. The developments and developing these characters and doing like you're saying, like how would people react to it flying? They just kind of gloss over that a lot of times, and I think that's what makes this one, like we're saying, the best superhero film.
Yeah, there is a plot, there is a villain, and we'll talk about Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor in a second. But I think Mario Puzo said it best. This is a love story between Superman and Lois. This is two people that are getting together. She may not know that he's Clark Kent, and there's that. And, you can say whatever for that part. But this is a love story between these two guys. This is a reporter that thinks she's seen everything until she meets this guy, like we said, and but then it's also a spectacle. And I think the filmmakers, I think Donner knew if they could actually get people to believe that he is flying and it doesn't look hokey, and you don't hear that whoosh, wind sound like from the show, and it really is something just marvelous. People are not going to care about the plot as much, but that's going to be a compliment to the film, I think, because it is going to be more of a spectacle. It is going to be more of this thing that's just going to blow the roof off of theaters. And I think that they did that well.
Yeah, I think so too. The film just keeps building and building and building until that grand climax where the world is falling apart. Yeah. And we'll come back to the ending later because, as you're saying, that whole love part, it really works, or it has to work to make that final part work. But let's get into the guy that we haven't even talked about yet, Lex Luthor, Gene Hackman, plus his little band of idiots, his little fun crew that he likes to hang around with.
Mr. Smucker.
Yeah, Gene Hackman, Lex Luthor. Not your comic book Lex Luthor so much. At least the look of him. But I think he's got the attitude. I think he's got the glubness, how he's so smart, and he's going to let you know it too. That's the thing, is he's going to make sure you know that his IQ's 200.
Everything on this side of the line is just hundreds and hundreds of miles of worthless desert land, which just so happens to be owned by Lex Luthor Incorporated. Now, call me foolish, call me irresponsible. It occurs to me that a 500 megaton bomb planted at just the proper point would
destroy most of California. Millions of innocent people would be killed. The West Coast, as we know it, would
fall into the sea. Bye-bye, California. Hello, new West Coast, my West Coast.
He's just so arrogant and such a funny guy to be around, too. So this is a character I think I liked as a kid, but I definitely have grown to appreciate more for Gene Hackman, his performance, and sort of this I would say he's more like a trickster or a joker than an actual villain, even though he does some terrible stuff and he nearly kills millions of people. He's the way he's portrayed. He's definitely, I don't know, like somebody I want to hang out with and hear his schemes and stuff, not somebody I'm repulsed by so much.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever heard of a film with so much star power? I mean, we start with Marlon Brando, Chris Reeve, Margot Kidder, but then we get to Gene freaking Hackman, dude. And he was pretty, he's pretty set by this film. I mean, he's probably not Marlon Brando's class necessarily.
He's won Oscars.
But he's up there. I mean, so we get to this guy, and he's totally Lex Luthor. Yeah, he's maybe not like Luthor the comics, but he really makes this character his own, and I dig it. I don't care that he's not bald. I don't care, that he's not exactly who you see in the comic books, but he's just got such a good chemistry with Ned Beatty's character, which I love. I love the henchman, especially Ned Beatty's character, Otisburg. I mean, just great, just fantastic. I mean, like, he doesn't steal the show or anything like that, but he is definitely a huge part of this film.
Yeah, and I definitely like thinking things about this guy, trying to figure out why is Lex Luthor,
right?
Because it's not like Dick Tracy. I think they wrote sort of depth to these characters. Like, he likes to hang around with one guy that's insanely stupid. And yeah, she's pretty average intelligence, maybe pretty smart, but they're not the super powered crew that you expect from an arch villain, or something like that. So I'm like, that's a deliberate thing. Is he wants to be around idiots to make himself feel even smarter. So when he says something,
he's the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah, he can just dunk on him constantly to make himself feel better. And I like that they wrote that in there. And I like the fact that he just, I mean, why does he want to kill Superman? Why? Yeah. It's a sport almost. He's like, I'm the smartest guy ever. Yeah. I should be able to figure out how to kill this guy that's insanely powerful. And it's very neat, this character, in my opinion. I've grown deep appreciation for him.
Yeah. I think he wants to kill Superman simply because he sees Superman as the only person that could ever threaten him, that could only be as smart as him, obviously be stronger and more powerful than him. So yeah, I think he's just the biggest threat, and he tries to, and we can talk about the sequel later, but in another episode. But he tries to align himself with the Kryptonians because he thinks they're going to be the brawn to my brains, because he's obviously not going to get Superman to do that. He tries to get him to trick him, as you said. And so I think it just comes down to, I've got to eliminate my only competitor.
Yeah, and that's an aspect of it. And it definitely adds a little more tension to that last part. I mean, if Superman could just fly off right there and he wasn't being weighed down by kryptonite, it'd been a different climax. And I don't know, I just really like the villain stuff, even though they're not that sinister, they're not that evil. They try to kill a million people, but it's also, like I said, this film captures that tone so well of that escapist sort of thing. And we don't want to watch bad villains in a movie like this. What they've created just makes a very pleasant experience. Definitely keeps elevating the action up as we get to the end. And that's where we get to, I guess we'll go ahead and get into sort of this final action piece, and then we'll come and hit some of the things that we might have missed along the way, or didn't give it its due credit. But this final part, it's very much a lot of stunts going on. Disasters happening all over the place. You see Superman just rushing against the clock, trying to save everybody. And I think this part's really cool just because it shows you the sort of the pressure on Superman, that he has to avert disasters like this. He has to be in all these places at once. And you definitely feel like, it's putting a strain on him. He doesn't seem confident like he did earlier. He feels like, no, this is taxing. This is dangerous. And it makes the scene work.
Yeah. I have a question for you. Okay, so um, I have been on the fence about this ending for years with the whole spinning the earth
Oh,
around. Because here's my question. All right, he spins the earth around, right, to save Lois. Why didn't he do that for his dad? He could have kept doing that and brought Pa Kent back, but lets him die. Uh, what do you think?
I mean, if we just want to find an in-universe example for that, I guess it would be our answer for that. I should say,
Yeah,
maybe when
yeah,
he went to the Fortress of Solitude, Jor-El told him about that power. He was like,
right,
"You could do this too." Maybe he didn't know he could do that at that time.
yeah. True
But to
that.
me, the reason why they threw this in here,
Hmm.
I didn't know we were getting to this part already, because this is the part that I used to hate as a kid. This is when I thought about Superman. This was the part of the film
Yeah.
that just fell apart for me. I thought it was the
Sure.
stupidest thing ever.
Sure.
I was like, that's so dumb. He just spin around the world really
Yeah.
fast, and somehow or another he turned back time.
Yeah.
So I think this part's actually really cool now, just because I don't see that he's actually spinning the world back.
Okay.
He's actually like, I guess the way time travel would work.
Yeah.
Where you've gone so fast, you've basically crashed into a different dimension or a different part.
Yeah.
And basically he's on this timeline now. And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what it happens there with that speed. But thematically, what is this part about?
Yeah.
This is Superman who's been crushed. So he's dealt with all these issues throughout the film. But this is the thing. Lois dies right in front of his face. He could not save her.
Yeah.
And it breaks him.
Yeah.
This is
Ooh.
this one piece of acting. We've been talking about Chris Reeve the whole time, his acting. But his anguish, his scream.
Ooh.
Oh man, that scene's pretty good.
It's very good. Yeah. It's completely believable. Like I said, I mean, there's not a minute of Chris's performance where you're just like, that's an actor. No, that's a character. That is somebody that you're watching and who knows what he's thinking about from an acting standpoint at that thing. And who knows if he's thinking about a relative, who knows if he is completely in the scene and he's, locked into what he's doing. But whatever got him to that point, to you have that guttural scream, I remember almost being scared of it as a kid. It almost like terrified me, just because you're like, I've been loving Superman this whole time, and he's just been this model of virtue, and now he's almost like if somebody had been there and like wronged him, he could have probably ripped him apart, in 2 seconds. But instead, he decides to do what he does. And I'm with you. I think I've gotten a bigger understanding on why he does what he does. And who's to say I wouldn't have done the same thing myself? So I think it works. I think it's a lot more effective now than maybe I thought so years ago.
Yeah, because he does that scream, he flies off, and he's almost like saying, forget everything that they've taught me.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what I want right now. And I think that's the big thing about the Superman character is, yeah, he faces external conflicts.
Yeah.
Lex Luthor does not scare him.
No.
It's more like what's going on inside that's the more compelling sort of conflict. Yep. Superman, yeah, he could just destroy everybody on the planet if he wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
He could decide not to save everybody like he does in Superman 3.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the big conflict. And at this point, he knows he's not supposed to do this because he remembers what Jor-El said about don't mess with their time and all that stuff. That's the one thing you can't do.
Yeah.
But he also thinks back to what you were saying earlier. He thinks back to his dad, how he could not save him. He could not save Jonathan Kent at that point. And he's like, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I can save Lois if I do this.
Yeah, I mean...
And that's once again, going back to what if Richard Donner got his way? Because this is supposedly, I think this is the part that creates the thing that releases them from the Phantom Zone or something. I think that by doing this, he kind of upset the flow of things and created something bad. And that's the thing is he's going to get consequences for that. So I like that version a lot better. but what we got is still pretty cool. And yeah, it's kind of hokey, kind of silly looking. But if you can appreciate the part of the story, appreciate this part of character and this inner conflict, it really works. And I think it's a very awesome ending to this film.
And if you remember, right before that, he flies up. It's almost like there's a barrier that's stopping him, and he hears all these voices talking about, Pa Kent's talking about the powers. He's hearing the voiceover of, and again, I think this all goes back to it's in his head now. I think this is his thoughts in his head, and he's thinking about, telling his mom when he couldn't save his dad, Pa Kent and all that. And he's like, you know what? No, I was stopped. I'm not going to let anything stop me now. I'm going to break through this, literally break through this barrier and save this woman because she loves me. She has been there for me and she supports me, and I can do this. I have this ability to do it. It may be wrong. It may be morally wrong. And it may be, I think it kind of shows that the character's not, completely perfect. He broke probably his own rule, but he did it for obviously a good reason.
Yeah. And it's really cool. And that's what I like about this film is you can come back and appreciate more things that you kind of didn't get as when you were younger. The screenplay is awesome. Like you said, Puzo kind of came up with the story. Then I think these like Newman people rewrote it, and then eventually Tom Mankiewicz came in and was a story consultant, made it really work. And I think the story is great. The structure of the plot's great. Cast is great, as we've been saying. But I think sort of the audio visuals working together, it makes these moments work. That if you do not have the photography you have, the way this film is shot, the beauty that this film is shot in, married with that John Williams score, the movie goes from like a 10 out of 10 to maybe like a 5 out of 10, just taking those two parts out. What do you think?
I think the story's fine. I think the acting is amazing, but I don't think any of that works without the way the film is made. It is produced, and we have these effects. If we, again, and I said it earlier, if we truly don't believe a man can fly, then we don't believe anything in this story. None of it works. And I think that's the genius of this film, is that you can sit here and talk about the story and talk about the ending and give all your disappointments with it. But really, honestly, what we remember about the film and what we love about it is what it made us feel. You watched it the other day and you couldn't stop telling me how happy the film made you and how much you just enjoyed the spectacle. And we're saying this, almost 50 years out. Imagine watching this film. I'm not talking about on Blu-ray. I'm not talking about on 4K. Imagine going to a theater in the 1970s, hearing "You'll Believe a Man Can Fly," and we didn't have YouTube back then, or they didn't. We weren't alive, but they didn't have YouTube or anything back then. They didn't see trailers. They didn't see things, and so they're like, "Yeah, okay." There's probably a lot of doubters, but then you see this score, or you hear the score, and you see these visuals, and that's, like we said, that's what makes this film ultimately worse. It worked. It's not so much the story, it's the visuals. It's everything that evokes this emotion that we've sat here and again, hopefully accurately talked about.
Yeah, and like I said, Jeffrey Unsworth, I mean, the way he photographs it, the visuals that are created, I mean, they had the best people working on this film. John Williams, he'd done some pretty big scores before this, but what makes this guy great is not only the themes that he can write, but it's, I think, the musicians that he pulls together for this. And that's what I appreciate about these great updates we've had in technology, is I can hear that now. I can hear basically these people that are recording this music are better musicians than your standard fare. They're really good. It's just all these elements, man. It's all this heart and soul that they put into this. that's why I've said it so many times. This is the best superhero film. They cared about making a good product, about this character, celebrating this character, and they're not doing fan service all the way through. They're not basically gratifying. I mean, saying, yeah, this is what fans want. We're going to entertain them, but we're not going to just make it just for them. We're not going to make it for these geeks or something. Yeah. Same time, they're not doing it. Yes, they want to turn a profit, but I don't foresee them saying, let's just do this to cash in while we can. Yeah. This is like, no, we wanted to make a good film. They definitely went through hell while they're making it. I'm not going to get into the production behind this so much, but if you want to, there's a lot of good documentaries out there about Richard Donner getting into it with the producers and just basically spending forever on a lot of these shots. But I'm glad they did. And I know it could have been different if Donner would have got his way. But I think it's still great entertainment and great film. That's really fun to watch at this time of year, at the beginning of the summer.
They use a word to describe movies a lot of the times, and that's blockbuster. And they say Jaws was kind of the first one. I think this is right there too. I think this is the term. Blockbuster is Superman the movie. I mean, it's Superman the movie. It's a 3-act play that's just, it's and it stands the incredible test of time. And it's an amazing film. It's an amazing spectacle with great acting, and it's everything you want, in my opinion. In my humble opinion, it's everything you want in a comic book film. But I think it's honestly everything you want in a film, period.
Yeah, if you're seeking that escapism, if you're seeking out that good fun, but also well-made fun. It's so I keep saying, like, this is incredible craftsmanship. You can enjoy it on that level. And like you said earlier, it makes you feel good. And that's what you got to watch in a movie. And that's what you seek in films a lot of times.
So, like I said, we could go on for hours and hours on this film, but we don't want to bore you. So we'll close it there. I think that we've kind of hit on everything that we wanted to when we did this, when we decided to do this. I'm really glad to revisit this film. I'm really glad that it's still out there for people to enjoy, and that it's getting better and better versions. And I think it's going to stand the test of time. I think people will still like this film 100 years from now. At least I hope so.
Hey! Thanks a lot, Superman. You put me on a road in the middle of nowhere during an earthquake. No food, no water, snakes everywhere. I had no idea if you were coming back. I mean, were you going to come back or no? Hi, Superman.
Listen, there's something I have to do. I'll see you later.
Can't stay still for a second.
Make sure you follow us on X at SuperCaZt with the Z and let us know. And share this video. If you know somebody that loves films and loves this film in particular, Superman, the movie, then share this with them and let them know, and give us a follow on our YouTube channel. It really helps us out. If you love this video, please give us a like on the like button, because it really does help us out. As we close out, dude, it's a lot of fun, and look forward to our next episode, dude.
We'll see you guys next time here on the SuperCaZt.
Take care, guys. We'll see you next time.